Hey all, it's Tom again. Sorry, my last video got cut off. Apparently, I have too many apps or what have you, and ran out of space on that. So, I'll try to make this one a little bit briefer. So, we were at the Demon Bear saga. So, basically, the Demon Bear was a demon that had been haunting Danny Moonstar since before the New Mutants started because of her connection with it and her parents, and there's a whole other thing. But there's a movie coming out soon. I think it's going to be April of next year, and I don't want to give too much away, but basically the Demon Bear saga was pretty big. So after the Demon Bear saga, the Danny was hospitalized. So Danny had to be she was recovering, and in the meanwhile, Warlock here, techno-organic alien shapeshifter, a refugee from his planet, on the run from his father, who was trying to kill him. He came to Earth because he decided, he saw that he registered the energy coming from it, and especially with the CR generators, which is a whole other story. But the X-Men have CR generators. It's alien generators. They have a lot of energy, so they can, they don't have to, pay for other, for the regular energy, and it'll power their danger room and their homes and everything. And it's alien tech, and he sensed it, so he went there. So of course he was confused. He didn't speak English, and he ended up getting in a fight with the New Mutants. Cannonball went to, realize, oh wait, we can't communicate with him. So he went to go get Doug Ramsey, because he's like, our friend Doug's a mutant, he can translate, and maybe we'll get this solved. So he comes over, and he outs everybody as a mutant, outs Doug to himself, and he ends up saving the day by communicating with Warlock, and thus Cypher and Warlock join the mutants. So at this time we have Mirage, Cannonball, Magic, Wolfsbane, Sunspot, Warlock, and Cypher. So there are 8 New Mutants at this time. So anyway, right afterwards, the kids get invited to go. They get tickets to go see Lila Cheney, a rock star, internationally known, British. Everyone loves her. Sunspot got the tickets. He's determined to woo her. She ends up falling for Cannonball instead, of course. And so nobody realizes, though, that she is an intergalactic teleporter. So while this alien goes to attack, during one of their songs, the New Mutants jump in to save her, and she decides to teleport Cannonball and herself and her band away. Warlock actually absorbs some of the energy and teleports the rest of the New Mutants after her. So they go to save her on her Dyson sphere, which is this planet. Actually, it's like a little weird round sphere that's surrounding a star, millions and millions of miles away in some far off galaxy. I don't think they ever actually said where Lila's Dyson sphere is. But they go, they save the day, free Lila, get Cannonball back, and then they end up transporting back to Earth. But she can't really pinpoint like she does, of course, in far distances like some teleporters do. So instead of ending in New York, they ended up in London. And so then they had to go, of course, get Xavier to get him home and everything and tell that story. So in the meanwhile, Sam, or Cannonball, ends up dating Lila Cheney. And so that is a whole mess all in itself. So then later on, the New Mutants end up dealing with the Beyonder. So the Beyonder is an alien from another galaxy who discovered the 616 reality, which is the main Marvel universe. So everything that I'm talking about here is all 616. There's millions of realities out there, and this particular one is that. So in my videos, that's the one I'm sticking to, unless I'll otherwise say so. So he comes, And, you know, actually, no, hold on. Let me rewind a little bit. So at this point, right afterwards, they find out that Karma is alive and well, but she's really obese. She ends up going to, she becomes a crime lord in Cairo, and she creates these gladiator contests, and of course for his amusement, because basically it's the Shadow King doing it. Karma's mind is locked away, so she's a prisoner in her own body. So the New Mutants go and they fight and they save the day, and Karma ends up fighting the Shadow King. So it's the two of them in a psychic battle, and he tried making it so that her think that her being obese and everything and weak was her doing, but she actually turned around on him. She goes, actually, it's you, not me. I wasn't like that before you came along, so this is all you. And she ends up tearing him to pieces and locks him away, and she wins. But in the meanwhile, she's still this really big girl, and she's miserable. And so right after they free Karma, Storm brings the New Mutants over to this island for a vacation. Storm at this point is powerless, so they're just relaxing, enjoying a nice day. Karma, of course, is wallowing in her own self-pity because of what had been done to her, and she's just doesn't know what to do with herself. So the Enchantress, of course, acting on behalf of Loki for revenge against the X-Men, decides to kidnap Storm and the New Mutants, bring them to Asgard. So Storm, of course, ends up over with Loki, and the New Mutants are there for the Enchantress to, play games with and torture and what have you. So at this point, Magic says, "Not today, witch," teleports the whole group with all these stepping discs. However, unfortunately, because of the spells that Enchantress has on her fortress, they get sent throughout space and time in Asgard. So they get teleported everywhere. Cypher ends up in a Viking hall, becomes basically a slave. Cannonball ends up in the dwarf mines to free the dwarves of being killed by dark elves. Wolfsbane ends up with the Wolf Prince up there. Sunspot ends up hanging out with the Warriors 3. Magma ends up being changed by the fairy folk into a fairy herself. Karma ends up in the middle of a desert and ends up having to. She finds this girl who's running away from this giant monster, and she ends up saving her. And she's like, instead of wallowing in her self-pity and going to just sit there and die, she's determined to get this girl across the desert to civilization to save her, so she'll have a chance of a life. And then, of course, there's Mirage, who ends up in the middle of these plains, and she ends up finding a Pegasus named Brightwind, and she saves him from these guys who go in to basically kill Brightwind. Brightwind, of course, senses Danny Moonstar was there to help, and Danny, being having a psychic link to animals, ends up unintentionally becoming a Valkyrie because Brightwind chose her. And she doesn't realize this yet. So they end up, she becomes a Valkyrie. Karma travels across the desert, ends up becoming thin because it took months for her to do that. Warlock ended up in the middle of... he ended up in hell and then escaped, finds Cypher, and slowly but surely they all find each other again. And then the X-Men at this time, of course, find out because of the psychic link that Illyana and Kitty Pryde have that that Storm and the New Mutants are in Asgard. So they transport up to Asgard with these lightning bolts from Archon that Cyclops got during another adventure, and they free the New Mutants and Storm. So the New Mutants plus Brightwind and the X-Men come back to Earth just in time for the Beyonder to attack. That's where I was before. So the Beyonder is, like I said, he's from another reality, another universe. He finds this one, and he decides he's going to play with it himself. And at one point, this is where we meet Boom Boom. Now, Boom Boom is a future New Mutant, but she went by the name Time Bomb at the time. She creates explosives. She hung out with the Beyonder. She was on her way to the Xavier School, and then the Beyonder got there. The X-Men saw that he was there. They went out to attack him, and then she's like, the hell with this, and she took off. She wanted nothing to do with the Xavier School. So, during that whole thing, the Beyonder tries to convince the New Mutants to join him and, have him basically be their god. And he starts with Magic, and he messes with her, and then a couple others, and then they end up refusing him altogether. He gets mad, but Sunspot, and meanwhile, takes off. He's like, I need to go see my family. I can't deal with this right now. And he takes off. Oh, I'm sorry, but after the New Mutants get back from Asgard, right before the Beyonder and all that, Xavier announces that he's leaving. And who should be taking his place? Magneto. So Magneto ends up being their teacher. And the angst of all of this, Sunspot's like, I'm not dealing with this right now. I'm taking off. I'm going to go see my family. It's been a while. And Beyonder comes back, and he's all angry with them because, they refused his gifts. And he ends up killing the other 8 New Mutants. So Cypher, Warlock, Cannonball, Mirage, Karma, Magma, Magic. They all die. He also wipes them from existence, like their memories. Oh, and Brightwind. He kills the horse, too. Wipes their memories, everything of them, from everyone's, minds. Nobody knows they exist. He brings them back, and then of course, nobody knows who they are still, but then they find out, oh, wait a minute, they actually are Xavier students, and then everyone gets their memories back and all that other fun stuff. Sunspot comes back. The New Mutants are depressed. Actually, no, I'm sorry. The New Mutants are depressed at this time. Sunspot's still gone. Empath and the White Queen sense what's going on. They decide to raise hell and manipulate the mutants so that everyone except for Danny and Warlock, they all join the Hellions. Because she convinced Magneto that that's where they needed to be. Then it turns out, Magneto finds out that, oh, wait a minute, they messed with my head. He comes to get him back. The Avengers fight. The New Mutants fight alongside him. And they end up, going back to their school just in time for Sunspot to come back. So at this point, we have 9 New Mutants. So the original 9 New Mutants are all together again. Then, right after that, Karma, her little brother and sister get kidnapped by Shinobi Shaw, which we don't find out till much later. That's who kidnapped him. And that's during the whole mutant massacre thing. And the New Mutants go to try to save him. Try to outrun Warlock's dad, who also attacks at the same time as the Marauders. And Magic, of course, she teleports them out of there. They end up getting split. Half the team ends up in one future, half the team ends up in another future. Then they come back in time with the help of Xavier, and just in time to stop a planet from being... Actually, no. Just in time to see a planet be destroyed by Warlock's father, the Magus. Cypher and Warlock merge for the second time, because the first time was in Asgard. The second time they merge there, and they go and rewrite the Magus's code and turn him into an infant and stop the destruction. But of course, the planet is already dead at that point, so that alien world is gone. And they end up going back to Earth and going back to Magneto and doing their best, to be students and teenagers. Then they go to this party, and of course, the bird brain at this point is being seen on the news, and they're kind of like, Karma ends up worrying about her brother and sister, because they're missing, her little brother and sister, Liang and Na. And she decides to tell them that she's leaving to go find them. This is the last time we see Karma for a long time, for years actually. So she disappears. She doesn't actually get seen again until later on in the Wolverine series, which I never actually read because I hate Wolverine. But she appears in there during his trips to Madripoor, because she actually ends up joining up with her uncle, the crime lord, to try, to work around to try to find the kids. But she doesn't show up again until the Young Hunt, which is after New Mutants become X-Force, and it's a whole other mess. But anyway, so at this point we have Cannonball, Cypher, Wolfsbane, Warlock, Magma, Magic, Mirage. Those are the team. And shortly after Karma leaves, Magma leaves. She goes to join the Hellions because she wants to learn from the Hellions at this point. I think the writers just did this just to kind of slim down the group, because 9 kids, that's a lot of characters to work with. I mean, they didn't even have that many in the X-Men at that point, so it's kind of a bit much. So, in the meanwhile, actually before those two left, in between the Hellions, them being killed and turned into Hellions, and then Karma leaving, the New Mutants encounter Mojo and Spiral, and they kidnap Elizabeth Braddock, which is we later on meet as Psylocke. This is New Mutants Annual 2, Psylocke's very first U.S. appearance. And this is back when she had her British body. So the Mojo tries to make them all members of his Brat Pack, along with some other kids, and Liang and Na. This is before they were taken as well. So, so the unlikely duo of Cypher and Warlock, at the time it was an unlikely duo, but actually ends up making sense because Cypher is often deemed as the weak link, and of course, since he's the one who communicated with Warlock in the first place and saved everybody, and the two of them often pair together, often having Warlock be his armor in a battle. At this point, this is the first time we encounter Douglock, which is basically the gestalt of Cypher and Warlock combined. And so the two of them end up saving the day by hacking into Psylocke's mind and kicking Mojo and Spiral out of there, and saving the day. Yay! Everybody loves them. And then of course all the shenanigans with the with Karma and Magma leaving. And that's the last time we actually see either of them also for a long time. Because eventually Magma ends up leaving the Hellions even and going back to Nova Roma to be with her family because of her father arranging a marriage to somebody else, and she was not having it either. So at this point we have our team right now is whittled down to the 7 of them. Then we have Birdbrain come into the picture, which I think was one of the worst ideas ever. It's this bird-human hybrid that escaped from a island full of animal-human hybrids created by this guy called the Animator. And anyway, he kidnaps. Actually, he took. Well, not he kidnaps. Sorry, Bird bring him over to the team. In the meanwhile, Sunspot and Warlock took off because Sunspot accidentally hurts Cannonball during a soccer match. The two of them take off and they end up joining this team called the Fallen Angels in New York City with Siren and Multiple Man, the Vanisher, Boom Boom, Ariel, Chance, Devil Dinosaur, not Bird Boy, Devil Dinosaur, Moon Boy, Gomi, Bill and Dawn. Basically, it's a bunch of alien and mutant thieves. Most of them are mutants, though. And so while they're off having that adventure, the New Mutants, which at this point consisted of Warlock, Magic, Cannonball, Cypher, and Mirage, with Birdbrain, end up going to face off against the Animator. Because Birdbrain is he's found on an ice floe in the North Atlantic, brought to New York, put in a cage, accidentally gets broken out during the New Mutants and Hellions' little last encounter, and that's actually the last time we hear of the Hellions in a long time. And they end up fighting, and then they fight all these Animates and then get captured by the Animator. And when the Right, which is led by this asshat named Cameron Hodge, which he did not look like this at the time, he actually was human looking, come in and they want to take the mutants off his hands so they can experiment and kill them. The New Mutants, of course, freak out and they convince the animals to accidentally let them loose, or the Animates, and in the battle, the Animator goes to shoot Wolfsbane, but Cypher jumps in the way and takes the bullets for her. During this battle, Sunspot and Warlock, of course, find their way to the island after they left the Fallen Angels, just in time for Cypher to die. So Cypher dies, and the New Mutants are left are, of course, Cannonball, Wolfsbane, Magic, Mirage, Warlock, and Sunspot. Magneto, of course, loses his shit and decides that they're not going to go anywhere unless I tell them they can. They're not going to use their powers unless I tell them they can. And the New Mutants, of course, revolt. And at this time, Magic, Ileana, she starts going through some changes, and her armor, which at the time was originally just covering her left arm and leg, ends up covering her entire body just about. So her demon side is coming out stronger and stronger. Meanwhile, this is when Inferno starts. So Inferno is this whole thing with a couple of Magic's demons, Sim and Nastier, decide to mess with people, and they toy with Madeline Pryor, which is Cyclops' wife at the time. She's with the X-Men in Australia at that time because everyone believes them to be dead, which is a whole other story which we're not going to get into right here. But she ends up starting this thing. She becomes the Goblin Queen because she makes a deal with them. And Magic ends up going up to space with the New Mutants, and they end up going to save this Lila Cheney, who gets captured, Sam's girlfriend, and this alien named Gossamer by this other alien named Spider. So they end up defeating Spider. They escape, go to Limbo, are stuck there, have to try to break loose, and the only way for Magic to do that is to really assume her full Dark Child persona. So this is her as a demon. and they travel to Earth with the biggest stepping disc ever, and end up creating this huge battle between the X-Men and the New Mutants and this other team called the Exterminators, which is right here. It consists of Rusty, Skids, Boom Boom, Richter, Leech, Artie, and WizKid. Now those kids were trained by the original X-Men, which at that time were called X-Factor. And basically by the end of the whole thing, the New Mutants end up leaving Magneto. They join up with the Exterminators. Magic ends up reverting back to her original age, which is 7 years old. That's the last time we see of her for a long time. Leech, Artie, and WizKid go off to this boarding school for kids with special needs. And the New Mutants end up becoming Mirage, Cannonball, Sunspot, Wolfsbane, Warlock, Rusty, Skids, Boom Boom, and Richter. So we're back to under the draw cutscene. See, set we enough 9 kids again, and of course with Brightwind. So they end up living on X-Factor ship, and then shortly after, Mystique and her jerks, the Brotherhood, which end up being actually called Freedom Force because they're government stooges, they end up fighting, and they go after Rusty because he's wanted. In the meanwhile, Hela wants her revenge for what went down in Asgard earlier and attacks Danny psychically or magically, and to save them, most of the New Mutants, except for Rusty and Skids, get transported up to Asgard. And they fight all that adventure. Danny ends up staying up there with Asgard being a Valkyrie full-time and trying to repair the wrong that had been done in their name. In the meanwhile, we have Rusty and Skids back on Earth. They are fighting. They end up getting taken by the Mutant Liberation Front after they get captured by the government. Mutant Liberation Front is led by Strife, and they end up joining up with him temporarily, just so they, or what they mean to be temporarily, so they can get out of that federal prison. They end up being brainwashed into becoming actual members of the Mutant Liberation Front, unlike the actual regular members, which join willingly. So at this point, the team ends up being Cannonball, Sunspot, Warlock, Wolfsbane, Boom Boom, and Richter. This team goes on for a while until Cable joins, because at this point, Xavier's off in outer space. Magneto is nowhere near him. Moira wants to take Wolfsbane because Moira has gone all dark, and because of Xavier's son Legion, which is a whole other story. But they're not having it. So Cable ends up coming in, saving the day with his guns. And this is where Liefeld comes in. And if anyone knows, I actually do not like Liefeld. I met him personally. We just did not get along. Anyway, so he ends up joining the team, taking over, turning them more into more of a militaristic type team. And during this whole ordeal, Cameron Hodge attacks the X-Men and the New Mutants and X-Factor. And he ends up killing off Warlock. And then Wolfsbane ends up being turned into a mutate, ends up staying on Genosha, so she's gone. And so at this point, it's Cannonball, Boom Boom, Richter, Sunspot, and Cable. Then Richter, of course, isn't having it. So he's like, no, I'm going to go back to Genosha to go get Wolfsbane back. And Sunspot, in the meanwhile, is having to deal with his dad, because his dad's killed by Gideon. So Sunspot is like, bye Felicia. He takes off. Who joins up with the team is Warpath. And then we have Shatterstar and Farrell, and who we thought at the time was Domino, but actually ended up being Copycat. So that was the team at that point. More in a bit.